Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, police officer attempted to intimidate my patient, loses fight to physics. Force me into the military? I'll have a year of free time instead. Deal with it or find a new job? Easier than you think, bub. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Police officer attempted to intimidate my patient, loses fight to physics. I'm a paramedic. A few months ago, we're coming back from a routine patient transfer when at an intersection about 4 blocks from the base I notice a woman sitting on the side of the road with her arms wrapped around herself and her head down. I nudge my partner who's driving, and we flip on the lights and I see her head come up real fast, and she looks terrified. I get out and she relaxes when she sees the ambulance. After I approach, I notice bruising on her wrists and other similar signs of domestic abuse. She seems hesitant to get up off the curb and into the ambulance, so I decided that I would at least pull the cot out of the back and give her something a little more comfortable than concrete to sit on. Now a few important details. All the cots in my service are striker-powered cots. You've almost certainly seen these before. They're bright yellow with black handles and side panels. These cots have a motor and battery built in to allow us to raise and lower the cot at the touch of a button instead of throwing out our backs having to physically lift the cot up after loading someone. They're usually paired with an automatic loading system built into the ambulance that lifts the cot up to the right height to be pushed inside and also secures the cot when loaded. There's a little red tab at the end of the track, just inside the doors, that you press down to free the cot and allow it to slide out. When you press this tab, it simply releases the cot and the loading carriage it's connected to, and it's up to you to keep it under control until it reaches the unload position and locks into place again. This can be problematic because these cots weigh about 125 pounds, about 55 kilograms. As soon as I hit the release tab for the cot, I hear lights and sirens behind me. It's a city police car. Which is weird because we had not yet requested police, and we were outside the city, in the sheriff's department jurisdiction. We merely informed dispatch that we were stopping to check on a woman at such and such intersection. The woman says something along the lines of "Oh God, he's here," and moves faster than me, seeing free food being distributed at base. She dashes past me and pretty much hurls herself into the ambulance, sitting on the bench seat. The cop is approaching and he's pissed. I put 2 and 2 together and slam the ambulance doors shut. Let's call this officer Police Officer Steve, or POS for short. POS, is she in there? Me, who? POS, you know well who I am talking about. Me, you mean my patient? I'm afraid I haven't gotten a name yet. POS, open those doors, I need to talk to her. Me, you're not using my rig as an interview room. You can talk to her at the hospital. We go back and forth like this for a few minutes. My partner at some point came back to see what the holdup was, but overheard my stonewalling and went back to the cab to call our chief. I continue my routine of deny and delay until a pair of deputies, likely specifically requested for this by the chief, arrive. Oh good, now I have witnesses. See, we had stopped on an upwards incline. I had hit the release tab on the cot and it wanted to slide back. I had to close the doors so swiftly, I didn't bother pushing the cot back against the stops and locking it in place. Emboldened by the presence of 2 deputies, he gets in my face. Get out of my way or I'm gonna have to charged with obstruction. Okay. I step out of his way, and he opens the double doors. Between the cot, the monitor, and the jump bag, I'd say there was probably close to 160 pounds contained by those doors. All of which comes barreling out and hits POS square in the chest. He goes backwards and falls on his ass. One of the deputies laughs aloud. The other walks up and kneels down beside the guy. He says, "Your shift captain is going to be here in 5, I wouldn't be here then if I were you." POS gathers himself up and scowls at me, then stomps off. There is a limited amount that I can say about the aftermath as the trial is not settled yet, but we all know how well charges stick to cops. The woman is now living elsewhere, the cop is still a cop, and I have been getting pulled over at least twice a week ever since then. But the video footage of him getting body checked by that cop remains one of the best things I have seen. Edit, for clarification, yes, the woman was / is married to POS. And yes, he is allegedly responsible for the abuse. As a domestic abuse survivor, thank you for going out of your way to protect her from him. The worst situations are when the abuser is in a position of power, or has friends in positions of power that will assist them. Kudos to you and the deputies that made him leave. I'm sure that woman will remember your assistance for a long time. I will say though, I would pay big money to see my abuser get knocked on his ass due to his own stupidity. I'm sure watching that happen to him made that woman's day. Right? Like I am separately furious that even in this situation the other cops were like LOL, better get out of here before you get caught. Getting pulled over twice a week is clearly harassment. What does his department say about this? I can't recall the case, but I do know someone successfully sued over this exact police behavior, pulling someone over twice a week. This is what I was thinking. Not even counting that it's being done to an EMT. Thank you for keeping her safe that day. Force me into the military? I'll have a year of free time instead. This isn't my story but my father's, so I don't know all the details, but I still thought it'd be fun to share here. My father was one of the last conscript soldiers in the country before the conscription was cancelled completely. During this time, there was lots of unemployment and only 1 in 20 men still had to go in the army. My father was one of the few people that actually had a job, but he was also the unlucky man that had to quit because he had to go to basic training. He was really pissed off because he lost his job but still wanted to make the best of it. That was until he realized that he had to work in the most useless place you can imagine. I don't remember the name of the place, but it was on the other side of the country, and the whole reputation of that place was that only the useless men were there. That's when my father decided that he wouldn't spend his time in a place surrounded by demotivated hippies and he wanted to get transferred or to just go anywhere that wasn't there. He went to his supervisor and basically made up a story of how he's mentally unfit to serve. He used anything he'd ever experienced so his supervisor would let him get out, and it worked. My father then got sent to a city only an hour away from his hometown, and his only job each day was to secure an abandoned building. He had to call headquarters at 8 in the morning and call again at 6 p.m. so they knew that he was there. What did he do in between those times? He freely explored the city, listened to music while chilling out in the building, made new friends, and basically had a vacation for a year straight. His reasoning behind it all is that if the government forces him to serve in a useless army, he'll do the bare minimum himself. He called twice a day, which was all they asked him to do, so whatever he did in the meantime was all up to him. So he was going to be sent to a place where the reputation was that only the laziest and most worthless one, so he convinced someone he was mentally unfit to get stationed someplace where he could be lazy and worthless? I'm currently serving. What you're explaining right now actually happens. Anybody that gets sent to a unit with a reputation of being high speed is magically transformed into a motivated army super soldier. If they're going to a base with a reputation of people avoiding work and getting out of PT, they end up doing exactly that. Call it fulfilling stereotypes or self-fulfilled prophecies, it's a thing. I served 1 year in the Navy as a driver. Cars, not boats. Since I had to serve, I picked something that would benefit me. I got sponsored truck driver license, but never drove a truck in the Navy. I drove high-ranking officers to and from the airport, cause they couldn't take a taxi or the bus. I even got to visit top security radar stations and weapon depots. I lived in the same building as the officers, ate the same meals, and had no curfew. I had nothing to complain about. Not me, but my dad. He was conscripted in Her Majesty's Royal Air Force in 1956. Instead of being sent to airframe school, they realized he had a motorcycle license and a professional motocross license. They assigned him to the escort and courier and gave him a brand new Triumph 650. He got to crisscross Britain as fast as he could for 2 years. I'm old enough to remember a Yes Prime Minister episode when someone was suggesting bringing back national service. A general said the reason they weren't keen was that it would involve issuing firearms to unhappy young people. Basically, national service means chavs with assault rifles. Good for your dad, but I don't think this is malicious compliance. Deal with it or find a new job? Easier than you think, bub. As a young adult, I decided to move several hundred miles away on a whim without a new job lined up. Fortunately, the relatives I was living with knew a ton of people in the small town and were able to get me a job within a week at the local grocery store. I was to be a courtesy clerk bagging groceries and stocking shelves. Immediately, I made friends with co-workers and some of the customers weren't too bad either. However, management was a different deal. Like the HR manager who would waste a customer's time telling them recipes for the items they have and holding up the line. She would also call me from the back of the store to bag 2 items and help the man barely older than me to his car, despite him protesting. There was also John, the general manager. John would be nice in groups, but if he got you alone, his true colors would show. He once berated me for having a 5 o'clock shadow even though I shaved right before work. My hair is dark and grows quickly. Sorry, dude. Can't help nature. After a few months, the night janitor, technically early morning, quit. John decided it would now be my job to polish the floors every morning. My previous job was at a movie theater, so working from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. was normal. Mornings? Not my jam. This would require me to be at work by 4 a.m. But I was told this would be for 1 to 2 months tops. I was even thrown a sweet 5 cents raise for my troubles. How could I decline? After a month, I asked John how the search for a replacement is going. He says probably 2 weeks and everything will be settled. After month 2, I ask again. John says the first person fell through and suggests that maybe I know someone who might be looking for a job. I assure him that is not the case. After the 3rd month, I was completely over it. Again, I approached John and explained that I cannot keep doing this much longer. He replies, "Not my problem. Find someone else or a new job." This pissed me off, but I wasn't in the position to walk out right then. I figured I'd start applying anywhere I could. A couple of days later, possibly even the same day, my relative drags me with them to go look at new cars. While discussing prices and waiting for the sales manager to respond, my relative and the salesperson were just BSing and I mentioned what John had told me about the job. The salesperson raised an eyebrow and walked away. Moments later, the sales manager approached and said they were looking for a detailer and asked if I was interested. It would be a regular schedule, no evenings, and higher than even my previous theater job as a manager. While my relative was signing financing paperwork, I was filling out a new hire packet. I was to begin work on Tuesday of the next week. When I got home, I packed a bag and began driving to my hometown to visit friends. I knew I wouldn't have to work for about a week, because at midnight I called the grocery store and told them I would not be returning to work. If you have any questions, please ask John. Epilogue: a year or so after my departure, John was mysteriously no longer working at the store. Nobody knew why, as he had another 5 years before retirement. One day I had to go to the bank to deposit a check and John was the teller. It was so fun to watch him deposit my paycheck from my new employer. Not my problem, says the person whose problem it absolutely was. Well done. It's amazing how many things are not a problem until it's their problem. The best response to "not my problem" is saying "challenge accepted" in your head. Great. Hiring manager is a big promotion. Let's schedule a sit down for this afternoon to discuss my new pay rates. Yeah, never tell someone that the item in question that is your literal job is not your problem. It will never end well. I mean, it probably ended well plenty of times, where the other person would just give up complaining and do whatever it was. The problem is that every time he did it, he was rolling the dice, until it finally came up wrong. I was inspecting a Wendy's one time as a local health inspector, happened to look up when I got to the customer counter and there was a former boss waiting in line. The kicker? He'd just gotten out of the slammer after several years for a well-publicized fraud case where he'd taken money from many people to build swimming pools and, oops, forgot to build them. He was also a real prick the college summer that I worked for him. Made my day. Remembering that whole thing. The ending where he had to deposit your paycheck was the icing on the cake. Nicely done. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.